Hello and welcome to episode 185 of Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Of course, I am your host, Rick Doherty. I've been waiting for months to have this conversation. My co-host Maz is going to be here to start a multi-episode conversation about the announcements from the D23 Expo this past weekend in Anaheim, California. Today, we're going to focus strictly on theme park announcements for Walt Disney World. I promise that we'll talk about the announcements for the other Disney theme parks around the world and the announcements in movies, computers, television, and musicals. All of that in future episodes of the podcast. We have so much to get to that I'm just going to quickly ask you to make sure you're subscribed to the Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty YouTube channel. If you're already subscribed, like and comment on videos and episodes of the podcast. It may seem ridiculous, but those things all really help us. Right now, I'm stoked to talk some D23 announcements with Maz. Thanks for being here.
Thanks for having me.
So I'm going to start this off like people who like jazz say, you don't only have to pay attention to the notes they're playing, you have to pay attention to the notes that they don't play. So I want to start this off by talking about announcements we didn't get about the Walt Disney World parks. And I think the first one that really interested me was Figment, because the rumors for the Imagination Pavilion were either Figment is going to get an updated version of the ride that might look a little bit more like the first version of the ride, or that Inside Out was going to be coming to the Imagination Pavilion. We have a hugely successful and popular character in Figment. Popcorn buckets, meet and greets with huge lines. Figment is very popular. Inside Out 2 just made over $1 billion. And it feels like they don't know what they want to do with either of these two properties. And is it possible that Disney just thinks the Imagination Pavilion is fine as it is right now?
I feel like they think it's fine for now, at least, because there are enough Figment diehards who are still going to go and ride that ride. And I think as, lines throughout the parks are longer, that one's a typically consistently shorter wait. So I think there is some appeal in leaving that to be an easy access ride. I am surprised they didn't say anything, though. I'm surprised we didn't even get, like, a maybe in the future we'll see a revamp. But I feel like they've put so much work into Epcot that now they are kind of feeling like they need to focus on everything else before they go back into Epcot.
I agree with you on that part very much, because we really only have one tiny announcement out of Epcot. The thing that worries me as a Figment fan is with the popcorn bucket, with the new meet and greet, Figment right now is as popular as he's going to be at any point in the theme park's history. And that might mean that they are trying to let that die down so that they can do Inside Out in the future. But I don't know. It actually kind of leads into another thing they didn't announce, and that's the Wonders of Life Pavilion, which was going to turn into the Play Pavilion. This is the big gold dome building that is right next to Guardians of the Galaxy Cosmic Rewind. And just like they don't address the fact that there's this big gold building in the park, they didn't address what they're planning on doing with it during D23.
I feel like they don't even know. I feel like it was going to be the Play Pavilion and they had these grand plans, and then we saw how all their plans got kind of shifted for everything in Epcot, and things got kind of downscaled and changed. And I feel like now they're like, okay, can we do this on a smaller scale? Do we need to pivot entirely? Let's wait and see. And I feel like we're once again in a little bit of a holding pattern there.
The Wonders of Life Pavilion is just space that should be used for something, but like you said, I think they've almost paralyzed themselves with they don't want to spend any more money on Epcot because they had these huge plans. Really, if the pandemic affected any theme park, it was Epcot that really got diminished through all of the pandemic situations. And that Wonders of Life Pavilion, I think, is going to sit empty for more years and years and years.
Yeah, I think they've figured out a way to operate the park without having it in play. So why spend the money on it right now to bring it into play when they can get by without it?
Yeah, this is going to get into a problem I'm going to address with you a little later in the episode, but I want to get to the really big thing that they didn't announce. And for some reason, the Walt Disney Company, Josh D'Amaro, Bob Iger, they looked at their theme parks and they thought, does Frontierland need more stuff? Absolutely. Does Animal Kingdom need new stuff? Sure. Hollywood Studios, we just had a huge multi-year construction project at Hollywood Studios. Do we have to put more stuff there? Of course. You know, Tomorrowland is looking like an absolute dumpster fire. Should we do anything about that? Nah, we're good. Nope. Tomorrowland is fine, apparently, according to Disney. And while we're talking about Walt Disney World in this episode, that goes for Disneyland as well. Both of these Tomorrowlands are a hot mess, and they just 100% ignored it.
Yeah, it's kind of wild. I said on Twitter, it feels a little bit like not putting on your own oxygen mask on a plane before you put on, the person next to you. Like they're focused on the kid next to them, making sure they're okay before making sure that what they have already is okay. And I feel like Tomorrowland's becoming like the little baby forgotten stepchild that needs love and attention. And I don't know how much longer it can realistically go in its current state because it's kind of noticeable to guests that it needs work done.
And they did just add Tron Light Cycle Run to Tomorrowland. But when you look at the map of Tomorrowland, when you look at the layout, right now with it still being a boarding group for some unknown reason, but with it still being a boarding group, if you don't have a boarding group for the ride, you're not going to go into the back corner. It's tucked into that back corner. So it's really not doing anything to help guest flow in Tomorrowland right now. It's beautiful, but what you really want to do is get people into the queue so they're not in other parts of the park. But with it being a boarding group, it's not even doing that right now. You have empty spaces that used to be Stitch's Great Escape and then the Stitch Meet and Greet. You have Monsters, Inc. Laugh Floor, which we'll talk about a little bit later. Are we going to have that intellectual property in two different parks? It just really feels like this is such an underutilized space. And then you have the Tomorrowland Speedway, which smells bad, is like everybody's least favorite ride at Walt Disney World. I understand kids get to ride cars and it's not their least favorite, but it takes up such a huge amount of space. And they said, okay, we have an attraction based on cars and nobody likes it. And it takes up a huge amount of space in a land that really needs some revitalization. So when we're going to build a new land based on IP called Cars, where are we going to put it? And this is going to be the first announcement that they did make that we're going to be discussing today. And it's not a whole new land. It's going to be added to Frontierland. But there are going to be 2 Cars rides that are going to eliminate the Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer Island. First, let's talk about Cars Land, why it didn't go in Tomorrowland, and what we think about that before we even get to Rivers of America and Tom Sawyer Island.
For sure. And the concept art for Cars Land looks very cool. It does look like they've tried to tie in elements of, they said the expansion will be Cars goes out to the frontier to try to explore more area. So they're kind of setting up the story of it still being part of a frontier-esque world. So I think it could work. And from the concept art, it does look like it will fit in that area. So I can see why, if they wanted to go that direction, that's what they ultimately chose to do with it. I also feel like, really, bottom line is Cars Land in Disney's California Adventure is hugely popular. It is a massively successful land. And I really think Disney was like, well, if we put a Cars overlay in Tomorrowland, we're not really utilizing it to the full extent we could. And if we build a whole land, it might be as successful as California, and then we get to do more with it. And I really think that's kind of the impetus behind that decision.
I want to say first and foremost that Cars Land at Disney's California Adventure is amazing. As somebody who has never seen a Cars movie, I still spent a ton of time in that land when I was at DCA. And I do think that the additions that are going to be coming to Frontierland are going to be good. I do think they will create good rides to go in that land, and I think they'll be incredibly popular. I also think it will be popular with kids because Cars, the entire franchise, is very popular with kids. And I'm not even a person who thinks it doesn't fit with the Frontier because the whole thing was Route 66. And I'm a little disappointed. Well, I'm just going to get into it now. The location of where they're putting it is the only problem that I have with it. If you look at Frontierland, it starts after Liberty Square, and even the numbers on the buildings correlate to the year the building is supposed to be. So as you move through Frontierland, it's getting later and later in history until you get to Big Thunder Mountain, which was mining in the 1860s, 1870s. I feel like Cars Land could have just very easily been themed towards Route 66, have it be beyond Big Thunder Mountain in that area past the railroad, and it would have fit perfectly timeline-wise. I mean, obviously, you're messing around with stuff a little bit, but it would have basically made sense timeline-wise. It would have been separated by the railroad, so the fact that you go from real Frontier into fake Frontier really wouldn't have clashed too much. And I am upset that we are losing Tom Sawyer Island, the Riverboat, and the Rivers of America, not because every time I went to Magic Kingdom I did those things. Like, I understand the people who are saying, oh, you're hypocrites, you never did the stuff. But part of the Magic Kingdom, part of any theme park is the atmosphere, the ambiance. I know you said you don't care about sightlines. You said that on Twitter. And I kind of understand that. Like, if I can see Cinderella Castle from Frontierland, it doesn't bother me, right? Rapunzel's Tower is a little weird in Liberty Square, but I've even gotten used to that, and I'm not really worried about it. What I like is to have these areas that are picturesque, that do provide for, listen, these parks are getting hotter and hotter. And there was a body of water in Frontierland. If a breeze went past the body of water, it gave you a little respite from those triple-digit Florida days in the summer. And, we used to tease you that Animal Kingdom was a hot park. And that was the joke for years, that it's so hot at Animal Kingdom. Well, then, after a few years of Animal Kingdom being the hot park, Then they opened Toy Story Land and Galaxy's Edge at Hollywood Studios with no shade. So now Hollywood Studios went and became the hot park. And I'm worried that without the Rivers of America, when you throw two more hugely popular rides, because when these two rides open, I know one will be an e-ticket and one will be more for kids, but they're both going to be incredibly popular. Just look at Navi River Journey and how popular that still is in Animal Kingdom because it's quote unquote new, but it's really not that new anymore, and it's not a huge e-ticket ride. For years, there's just going to be so many more people crammed into that area, and I think it's going to turn that into a very, very hot location.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the reason they're doing this, my personal thought, why they're putting it here, I don't want to get into yet because it relates to another announcement we haven't talked about yet. Um, but I will get into it. But I think for me personally, it's not so much about losing Tom Sawyer's Island because I feel like they needed to do something different with that anyway. But it's like you said, it's losing that river. And I think, Magic Kingdom is so crowded. It is wall to wall people most days of the year. And having an area that you could walk where you had tons of people on one side of you and then no people on one side of you is huge. Being able to walk along that river was probably one of my favorite aspects of Magic Kingdom because it made me feel like I wasn't so boxed in with crowds all the time. It does lend to that atmosphere of, you know, you feel a little bit like you're not in such a crowded theme park. You get to look out over the water and pretend that maybe you are actually here and not, fighting through crowds of people to get to your 12:15 multi-pass return time. So I think from that aspect, I will miss it. And I really hope that the Imagineers designing this land take that into account, especially, not saying that they listen to people online, but I hope that they do kind of take the atmosphere into account when they're designing this new land and we get some sort of water feature or, breakup between the areas to still give it a little bit of that. I just hope we can maintain some of it.
And a lot of people will talk about how, well, you have to get on a raft to get to Tom Sawyer Island, and now we're losing an area for kids, but oh, was it all that accessible? Well, we had talked in past episodes, what if they built a bridge from Frontierland to Tom Sawyer Island where you could freely walk back and forth? And then people might say, well, then you can't have the Liberty Bell riding on the Rivers of America. Well, apparently we're getting rid of the Liberty Bell anyway. So if we could at least save the water, keep the Liberty Bell banked on the Rivers of America, turn it into a restaurant, and then you're getting more dining at Magic Kingdom, which is desperately needed. You're getting a cool environment. You're still using this great part of Disney history, and you're keeping the water feature inside Magic Kingdom. That's what I'm the most upset about losing when it comes to the Rivers of America. And there's one other thing about this decision that has really, grinded my gears. And we are starting to see now with the implementation of Lightning Lane and paid Fast Pass that Disney is not going to spend any money on anything that is not going to be either a DVC lounge, a restaurant, or a lounge of some sort that will generate money there, or a ride that can generate money. And I think, not to get too much into Disneyland, but that bodes very poorly for us ever getting a people mover back in Disneyland, because that's not a ride where you can sell lightning lanes. And I think the focus has turned so much to selling these lightning lanes that the quality of the Disney parks has diminished, We've seen it with the DAS passes, which is something we are totally not going to get into right now, but we will at some point, and you won't want to miss that. But now it's starting to look like every ride has to be an e-ticket ride that they can sell lightning lanes.
Yeah, I was gonna say, if I put my CEO hat on for a minute, you know, from the perspective of making your board members and shareholders happy, you're gonna take as much square footage of that park space as you possibly can and turn it into something that's going to drive revenue for you. And that's what these two rides in Carsland will do. Will drive more revenue. They can put, a quick service restaurant there. They could put a snack stand there. Carsland is going to sell a whole lot more merch than Tom Sawyer's Island ever did. And so I think that is a huge driving decision or driving part behind this decision. And I also feel like, I don't want to rag on it too much because I do think it will be a good thing for the park. I think it's going to eat a ton of people. Capacity wise, that park is going to feel suddenly like it became so much bigger just because so many people will go to that area. You will have so many more people in Carsland walking around, waiting for rides, all of that than you ever did for the Liberty Bell or Tom Sawyer's Island. So that is a huge plus. But I do think that it was a little bit, hand in hand for the executives to say, hey, we can build out capacity without building on new land and having to develop new land from swampland. And we'll be able to make some extra money off of this, which, at the end of the day, Disney's a corporation. That's what they want to do.
If we didn't get so much talk at Destination Disney about Beyond Big Thunder Mountain, they really did kind of hurt themselves with that, because now everybody's thinking about that extra land there. And nope, we're just going to blow up Tom Sawyer Island. And I understand, I think I know where you're going to go with this, and we may as well just address this right now. And that's Villains Land is coming to Magic Kingdom as well. This is probably going to be in that land beyond Big Thunder Mountain. I imagine it's going to be more tucked behind Haunted Mansion. It would make sense to have that walkway come from Haunted Mansion and then take you into the Villains Land. I think of every announcement, this is the one that has gotten the most unequivocally positive reaction from the Disney community.
Yeah, I feel like it's multiple things. This is a fan service announcement where people have been clamoring for a Villains Land for, I don't know, over 10 years. People want this. And this is really an instance of Disney saying, okay, we see you. We're going to give you what you want. And trying to kind of build that relationship back with guests that I feel like some guests have felt like they've lost in the past few years. So I think that they're planning on putting this land in what was originally going to be Beyond Big Thunder. And I think that they want to put as much as possible back there. Like, they know this is the big fan service crowd pleaser announcement. So they want to put as much as they possibly can to that, which means that they can't put Cars Land there. They can't take up any of that space with something that isn't necessarily the big announcement. I mean, they saved this for last. This was their huge, we're going out on a high. We know you want this. We're finally giving it to you. So they can't really cheap out and be like, and it's going to be this tiny little launch pad area with nothing really to it. They got to go big.
And just thinking about Disneyland's Fantasyland, right? And they have all of those Fantasyland dark rides. They have the canal boats. They have the train. They have It's a Small World. All of that stuff. Think about how much there is to do ride-wise in Disneyland's Fantasyland. And now compare Walt Disney World's Magic Kingdom's Fantasyland to what is going to be Frontierland and Liberty Square. Fantasyland is going to feel empty, and Tomorrowland is really going to feel empty when you compare it to Big Thunder Mountain, Tiana's Bayou Adventure, Country Bear Musical Jamboree. By the way, I hate it. We'll talk about that later. Hall of Presidents, Haunted Mansion, 2 rides in Villains Land, 2 rides in Cars Land. That's going to be packed. That side of the park is going to have so much going on while the rest of it is going to feel so empty.
You know, on the plus side, this might mean that Peter Pan drops to like a half-hour wait some days. That would be exciting.
You know, you'd think, right? But if history has told us anything, it's that will always be a 90-minute wait. So let's get over to Disney's Hollywood Studios, where we are getting a Monsters, Inc. land. This is another one of those places where the placement is very, very controversial. We do not know the answer to this yet, at least as of our recording. And a lot of people are worried that this is going to be replacing the Muppets Courtyard and Muppet Vision 3D. I just want to say very quickly, I don't think that's where this is going. I think the roller coaster is going to be replacing Aerosmith Rock and Roller Coaster. And I think that probably either Animation Courtyard is getting blown out there with Launch Bay and the Disney Junior Dance Party, or they're really going to cram this in there next to Lightning McQueen's Racing Academy, right where Rock and Roller Coaster is now. Let's be honest, Aerosmith was hanging on by a thread already because we have some problematic nature that we have found out about Steven Tyler. Then the band went and retired. So now they're really just done completely. And this didn't really fit the current theme of Hollywood Studios. For the people who say there's not a theme to Hollywood Studios right now, I definitely think there is one. And part of it is Pixar. So this really would work there. Hopefully we don't lose Muppets. But how excited are you for this new land? Because I think Hollywood Studios needed this for capacity. They need to take advantage of land that is just going to waste in an already small theme park.
Let's be honest, how excited I am will be affected by where it's going. I will be sad if Muppets has to go away for this, but I do think this is a huge gain for the park. I think that, a Monsters Inc. land and coaster is going to draw huge crowds. I think that especially, I agree with you, I think the best place for it would be to refurb Rock and Roller Coaster to make it a Monsters Inc. door coaster, and to kind of take out Animation Courtyard because we don't need it. And, we're kind of abandoning the timeline in Galaxy's Edge anyway. So throw some meet and greets in there. It's okay. People don't care that much about the timeline that they tried to impose. They can easily move that Star Wars stuff into Galaxy's Edge and give that space to Pixar for Monsters, Inc. The one thought I do have about this land is we got the door coaster announcement, which again, hugely excited for. This is another thing that people have been requesting for decades and have wanted ever since the movie came out, which again, well, we'll get into that at the end. But my concern is it's going to be a suspended coaster. Will this be family friendly? Because I think to a degree, everything Disney does is family friendly, but Monsters Inc., kids love Monsters Inc. Are they going to be in a land where they can't do the main attraction?
Listen, I'm worried about this from the complete other end of the spectrum because I am 6'4" and I have a long torso, right? And sometimes these types of rides where you have to have the shoulder harness are tough for me. I've got very, very broad shoulders, and sometimes I have to hunch in a million positions to get into that Harry Potter ride over at Islands of Adventure. What is it?
Forbidden Journey.
Forbidden Journey, thank you. I don't know if I'm going to be able to ride this ride because it's going to have that shoulder harness, which is going to be constricting for me. And then you talk about having it be for kids. There's going to be a height restriction if there's a shoulder harness. So I hope that, like with Cars Land and like with Villains Land, maybe, yeah, we get that e-ticket attraction that is this door coaster. Hopefully they put in something small that will be good for little kids. And like we said before, Hollywood Studio just needs more attractions. It needs to take better use of its space. And that is one of the reasons that I don't think this is going to end up taking out Muppets Courtyard. First of all, that's not as big of an area as everybody thinks. And for them to truly gut that and turn it into a Monsters Land, they would have to get rid of both Pizza Rizzo and Mama Melrose. And yeah, we can laugh about both of those restaurants, but they're making money for Disney, and they're not going to gut something that's making money when they can get rid of that animation courtyard, which I was there just yesterday from when we recorded this. And I sat in animation courtyard for about a half hour. It was like 7:00 in the evening. So everything was bustling. People were trying to get their rides in before going to see Fantasmic. They were getting ready to head back to Galaxy's Edge to see it at nighttime. And literally, there were 2 cast members who were sitting at a stand where they can write your name in letters and put little artwork in the letters. And they were just sitting there because I was the only person within 50, 100 feet of them. Nobody was coming back there. And every person who did come back there just walked, looked, and was like, what? I don't understand. And then just left. Because by that point, Launch Bay was closed for the day. They weren't doing the Disney Junior Dance Party anymore. They still have an open Little Mermaid that if you have a space that is so underutilized like that, and you go get rid of Muppets, which has 2 restaurants and eats people in the attraction, because even if it's half full, that's still a lot of people who are out of the park and in the air conditioning. I know Disney makes bad decisions a lot. I just don't think they would make that bad of a decision, but hey, I could be wrong.
Yeah, I'm fully with you. I feel like it would be the wrong decision for everything you said. And plus, like you said earlier, Hollywood Studios has a heat problem. Toy Story and Galaxy's Edge have virtually no shade. And so having a spot, especially close to Galaxy's Edge, in Muppet Vision, where you can go inside, sit in air conditioning, sit down, enjoy something that the whole family can appreciate for, 20 minutes, that's a big deal. That's a pretty prime thing to have, even if, people kind of stumble into it because they're looking for air conditioning. Maybe they don't love the Muppets like some parks fans do, but they're still enjoying and appreciating what that ride gives them. And I think eliminating that and not having something like that for however long construction would take would be a big mistake.
You're saying some people just do Muppets Vision 3D for the halibut. Sorry, that was bad. So the one time my mother rode Star Wars Rise of the Resistance, I got her on the ride, and as we were getting off of the ride, it started to pour. And anybody who's ridden Rise of the Resistance knows that you can't stand and wait there because people keep getting off the ride, so they have to push you out and into the rain. So we were able to just quickly dart out of Rise of the Resistance, make our way over to Muppets because it's fairly close, and get out of the rain. By the time Muppets was done, it stopped raining. So it was like that perfect solution, and the parks need more places like that. Maz, I can't believe we have done one episode on the D23 announcements, and we haven't even gotten to your favorite park yet. So we're
There's so
going
much.
to get to that next week. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
That is just a small sample of what was announced this past weekend at the D23 Expo. There's still more Walt Disney World announcements we have yet to cover on this episode. Disney's California Adventure is getting a Coco ride, an Avatar ride, and 2 new rides in Avengers Campus. Disneyland Park is getting a Walt Disney animatronic, and we have an opening date for the West Coast version of Tiana's Bayou Adventure. Paris is going to be adding a Lion King ride and a Frozen Land. When you combine all of that with the movie and television announcements, there is a lot on the horizon for the Walt Disney Company. We will continue discussing all of that next Thursday on Tall Guy Talks Travel with Rick Doherty. Until then, have a great week.